My name is Kitty Burdett. I'm your host for this season's Red Pen podcast, where we start to assess the art of writing at a collegiate level and across the disciplines. This season's theme is centered around AI and how it's drastically impacted sort of just the writing space for the last few years. And in this episode, we're going to be focusing on the English discipline and what AI sort of looks like in the writing centric classroom. This week, we have an amazing guest, Dr. Sarah Steger. Did you want to kind of introduce yourself and say what you're into, just hobbies, anything that, floats your boat?
Sure. I teach in the English department of UGA, and I am interested in 19th century writers and writing. But I also am the assistant director of first year writing programs. So I teach a lot and focus a lot on writing pedagogies. And as such, we've been thinking a lot about AI and its role in writing, in particularly in our discipline. I'm really interested in technologies and the way that technologies help shape writing and the way that we write. And so one of the things I do is I am a developer for a writing technology that we use at UGA called ELW, e-learning for writers. And it just sort of offers a host of writing tools to help students as they compose and peer review and get feedback on their writing.
Awesome. Okay. And also you've won, I know I looked up the SEC award for the 2017-2018 academic year, and a lot of other things. I'll link all this stuff in the transcript and description stuff for the episode that kind of highlight your role. But yeah, I guess we'll just jump right into it if that's okay. So this year, the reason why I even emailed you in the first place to get you to interview is because Dr. Harding told me that you were kind of interested in seeing how AI is playing a role in your classroom this year. So can you just tell me kind of what that looks like for you and how your classroom looks this year?
Sure. So back in the spring semester, I was teaching a 19th century British novels class, an upper division class, so mostly English majors or English minors. And AI was really new, and I was reading a lot about it and thinking about how it could be used and whether it should be used. Everything was really up in the air, and nobody really knew the limitations of the technology. We had sort of just been thinking about how we could use it in the classroom. So as the final project in that class, one of the options for the final essay is I gave the students an option of using ChatGPT to write an essay on one of the works that we read. So they could make up a prompt and then feed it into ChatGPT and ask for an essay. And then I had the students annotate the resulting essay. So they would mark up where the AI was really convincing or insightful. And they would also, they love doing this, mark up where it was less convincing or where it was just plain wrong, where it misattributed quotes or it had plot information wrong or anything like that. So at the end, students wrote a reflection about the efficacy of the technology. And mostly those reflections were revolving around the limitations of the technology. They were really interested in how the AI muddled facts or oftentimes would repeat points. But they did indicate that it could be helpful in brainstorming and idea generation. So that was something that sort of at the end of the semester last year, I was thinking about and wanted to write into my class this semester. So to fast forward, this semester, I'm teaching first year writing classes. And so in each of the 3 major essays for my class, I'm giving students an option of using ChatGPT in various ways that are sort of guided as we go through the semester. So on the first essay, they could use the technology to help them brainstorm and understand a poem more fully before they wrote a poetry explication. And on the second essay, they could use it to help them think of a thesis statement on a topic, and they could use it for helping to guide them to secondary sources they might want to look at. And then on the third essay, we haven't done this one yet, but we're going to experiment with AI and writing style. So they're going to be able to ask ChatGPT to make edits to a paragraph draft and to think about to make it sort of sound more academic, to ask ChatGPT to help them sound more academic in terms of their rhetoric. So then they'll reflect about what changes the technology suggested and what that seemed to reflect in terms of the rhetoric. So we'll see how that one comes out. In any of these choices, if a student does choose to use AI, I'm asking them to cite their use, share the conversation that they had, and then do some reflective writing about the experience.
Okay, and so on that reflective writing, I guess, like how does it seem to be going for you? I guess, are people responding well to it? Are they enjoying it, or how are they feeling about it, you think?
So it's really interesting. I've been fascinated. So on the first essay in my first year rating class, only about a sixth of my students chose the AI option. I thought there would be more. And then that dropped to maybe, oh goodness, only a few students used it for the second essay. So I've asked them about it. And when they wrote about it and reflected, they a lot of their experiences with the first essay, they felt like it just overwhelmed them, that they would ask a question about a poem and they would just get reams, these huge, long, rambling explanations
Yeah.
that they didn't feel were particularly useful.
Mm.
And then, so they didn't pick it up in the second essay. They also, I think, were turned off by the idea of having to do extra work in terms of reflecting on their use, which
Yeah.
sort of to me uh, a, a writer and a teacher of writing, that was an important part of the learning experience. So I would say the ones who were embracing it, they're going to kind of go the whole route. They're just going to kind of experiment with it along the way. But I haven't had as many takers. A lot of students, I think, are nervous about using it.
Right, right. Yeah, I guess that would make sense because it does seem like a fear-mongery type like
Yes.
institution we're looking at right now. For the
Yes.
people who did use it though, did you see maybe how it impacted like a particular student's educational growth? Did you find that it was maybe more beneficial equally or less beneficial as the people who did the standard or traditional writing assignment? Kind of how did that look?
So one of the things that cropped up in their reflections was that it helped them think about, when they did kind of delve into all of the information that was the result. It helped them think about the text or the source material in a new way, in a way that they hadn't really thought about before. And they talked about it as being kind of conversational, which it is. And
Mhm.
so just, the idea of sort of expanding outside of their own thoughts and giving them a new
Mhm.
perspective. Now, when it comes to assessing the work, I'm not sure if that would be really apparent to me as somebody who's grading the work. But nonetheless, I think it is interesting to think about this idea of expanding. So I guess sort of overall, if I'm thinking about growth and education, it seems like AI can be really useful when a student is using the technology to enhance or deepen their learning, which is the way my students are kind of talking about it.
Mhm.
And that's very, very different from using AI to do the work for them. In a
Right.
lot of ways, I feel like it made more work for the students, which
Mhm.
is more opportunities for learning, certainly.
Right.
But yeah, it's not just replacing learning in that way.
Right, right. Okay, so on that, I guess, how do you feel like your experience kind of using this on the collegiate level can speak more broadly about the educational path for AI? So, would you recommend, I guess, pushing against it or going with it? And like, do you see that being beneficial? I know you said it kind of added to the student workload, but like, maybe you feel that that's a good thing.
Mhm. Yeah, I think that's a really interesting question that we're still trying to figure out. So
Mhm.
we're definitely very much at the beginning stages of trying to figure out the role here. And there's a lot of talk about how to use AI, quote unquote, productively, or whether or not it could be used productively, the capabilities and limitations of AI. And I think we're just still figuring that out. So on one hand, a lot of my colleagues and a lot of educators really think that there isn't a productive use for AI, and they're worried, and absolutely rightly so, about things like plagiarism, or definitely there are concerns about the bias inherent in large language models. Concerned with things about loss of jobs, issues with copyright, artistic integrity. So a lot of the sort of larger issues kind of crop up when we're thinking about the educational path. And so it's interesting because I feel like the right now, at least at this point, many universities and programs are really leaving it up to individual instructors. That it's kind of the burden is on an instructor to be clear about their expectations when it comes to using AI, and then the way their students can or cannot use something like Chat GPT in the classroom. So I actually think that's the best route for now. My hope is that we kind of continue along this path of offering that choice, so that if an instructor has concerns, then they certainly don't have to embrace using AI productively or not in the classroom, but that there shouldn't be top-down directives about, one size fits all, how to use AI or how not to use AI. So I like that. Right now, especially the trend in education is to allow instructors some agency, but also then to provide some resources and support about how to choose what they want to do in their classrooms.
Yeah, yeah. I think that's really
Mhm.
probably the best idea. I don't think that any like kind of larger institution probably should be coming in and telling you guys how to do it, considering the fact I think two y'all are handling it really well from what I'm seeing at least. But from so kind of pivoting a little bit, less so from an educational perspective and more of like a writer, because you and other your colleagues are, your academics, your writers. So maybe how does AI look in terms of just writing in general, kind of maybe even before you used it for educational purposes? What were your feelings on it just as somebody who was in the creative space? Did you feel kind of this threatening presence, or was it more so you were like, oh, now we can use this for something else, maybe? Or what was your
Mhm.
position?
Especially at the beginning, as I mentioned before, if you're thinking about AI as replacing learning, as sort of giving you a shortcut,
Yeah.
then that really goes against one of the foundational principles of writing, which is that we learn from the drafting process by revising and rethinking and returning, and that process itself, which is kind of like a productive struggle. So especially at the beginning, I worried that AI might kind of shove us forward out of this process too quickly, so we would lose that sense of productivity.
Mm.
Um, I think maybe that speaks to some deeply embedded ideas about suffering for art that I still need to think through. That is it necessary to suffer to produce or to be productive?
Right.
I also think in terms of creativity, I read an article about a music producer, Taryn Southern, and she wrote an album. It's actually, I think, about 5 years old, called "I Am AI." I am AI, and it was completely composed and produced with AI. I forget the technology, but nonetheless, in this article, she was talking about how she saw her use of AI as being more than just a tool, that she was kind of thinking about it as a collaboration. And she gave this example that I thought was pretty good, where she said, okay, a piano is like a tool, because it doesn't give you ideas, but AI gives you ideas. And then you can use it as a tool also then to
Hmm.
execute them. So it kind of crosses that line between tool and collaboration. So I
Nice.
thought that was really compelling, but I do have to say, when I listened to the album, I thought it was just really flat. Like, it was not
Right.
that interesting, the music. Like, I didn't feel like there was much that was compelling about the music
Uh-huh.
to me. And I guess part of my concern, thinking about AI and thinking about this kind of generative activity, is there, will it be the same with writing, right? Chat GPT produced writing is supposed to be very like flat, right? Like verbose and boring and kind of not
Yeah.
particularly interesting. It kind of, it's that like hive mentality speak. And I can read hive mentality, but I'm really more excited when a student, present some writing that stands out in some way, that because it has a unique voice, or it's like an outside the standard viewpoint. So
Mhm.
I guess when I'm thinking about writing as an art, I think an individual creator, I would like to think an individual creator will always be more interesting and compelling than something produced from the hive mind.
Right.
That might be kind of naive, but that's my hope.
Hi! Have you been trying to improve your writing skills? If so, you should check out the Franklin College Writing Intensive Program's course list. The Writing Intensive program works with a wide variety of departments here at UGA to provide students with writing courses that will challenge their skills and help them improve their writing in the disciplines of their choice. The Writing Intensive program offers courses in around 20 departments each year, including anthropology, history, music, mathematics, philosophy, statistics, genetics, and many more. If you're interested in learning more about the Writing Intensive program, take a look at our website, wip.uga.edu, and follow us on Instagram @WIP@UGA. We can't wait to see you in one of our classes and help you elevate your writing.
So my last episode, I talked to Dr. Davis. He's part of the philosophy department. I'm not sure if you know him, but he said he was in conversation at one point with one of the classics department's professors, and he said that he really changed his perspective a little bit in a way because the classicist was essentially saying that there isn't a reason why we should be kind of folding or letting AI just come in and do its thing and us just being like, well, let's just work with it. Well, let's just work with it. He was very much for the idea of like, let's say no. What would you say, like maybe your position is to people who are just like, why would you even attempt to use it? Just tell people it's not allowed and let that be that.
I think that I've been thinking a lot about other tools that change the way we write. Thinking back even to when, say, we started using word processors that allowed us to move ideas around in a piece of writing, or when we use something like a grammar checker, which is based on AI technology as well.
Right.
And certainly these tools have had some problems. Most writing scholars really push against the idea of like a standard English grammar or standard English language, and a focus on correctness when it comes to grammar. And so this kind of writing, grammar checkers definitely have problems, but they're really widely in use. So trying to ban their use would be pretty much impossible without insisting that students just write their essays with pen and paper in class, and that could be an option. But of course, that's not the way that our students are going to write when they leave our classroom and enter the workforce. And so I think what I would say is banning the use of a technology is in some ways, you can control that in your classroom, but we've got to think about the larger ways that people are going to produce and write and think. So I think entering that conversation is what I would say to my colleagues, is just thinking about it. Well, it's, we've been through this before. We know how technologies change the way we write, and we know that this sort of hard line, you can't use this, isn't always going to work. So I don't know if I would have a rebuttal necessarily, although I just think, and I definitely think we need to be mindful of the way that these technologies can be exploitive or unfair or biased. So not necessarily a rebuttal, but just, thinking about the implications beyond the kind of controlled space of my classroom, right?
Yeah. Do you feel like the English department or your fellow writers or colleagues are beginning to respond in a similar way that you are? Or how do you see the tide turning, I guess, in terms of your position in the collegiate space?
Some people are experimenting with AI in the classroom. I don't have a hard sense of the numbers of that. We, in the first year writing program, have a professionalization. We offer professionalization for our writing instructors, and AI is our focus this year. So one of the things we're doing is thinking about ways that it can be used in the classroom. It definitely is emerging. The conversation is emerging a lot around a couple of issues. First, plagiarism, thinking about if a student has cheated by using ChatGPT or AI. A lot of discussion is around AI detectors and how they're problematic, especially against ESOL writers. They tend to flag ESOL writers more frequently, or they have a lot of false positives. So thinking about and having conversations about like the challenges that AI presents when we're thinking about academic honesty, that's something that's a big part of the conversation. That's a big battle right now. I think the second issue that crops up is just being clear in an instructor's expectations regarding AI. You know, we already have syllabi that are really long, and it's sort of like just keep, every time there's something new crops up, we've got to add something to the syllabus. And so thinking about how to include a syllabus statement that makes the instructor's stance and the expectations clear or explicit to students. So that's the other thing that's kind of a lot of the conversations were revolving around those two things.
Gotcha. I guess kind of last, big question is, would you give any type of advice to, your students or your colleagues or even just writers in general concerning AI as you see it? I guess, where do you feel like we should go from here? Where do you feel like we're headed? Or how can we, prepare ourselves for kind of entering this, like you said, this larger world beyond the collegiate space where AI is? How do you feel like we should be preparing ourselves?
I think we just need to keep having those conversations. And I don't think there's any better place to do it than the writing classroom of a university. It's the best place to do it. I feel like I'm learning so much from my students and their experiences and their fears and their expectations. You know, they're teaching me about how they're thinking about this technology and how they're using it to study or to learn more about a subject, or they're thinking about how to ask more effective questions to get better results, or the limitations of the technologies are really sort of outlining that for themselves and for us in the classroom. So one of the other things I'm learning is their own anxieties. They're very nervous about being falsely accused of cheating. That's something else, you know. So I think just being able to have conversations about all of that in our classrooms it's like I said, it's the best place to have those conversations about how we write and how technology affects our writing and how our approaches to writing are naturally going to evolve as technology evolves. Yeah.
Nice. Okay, well, thank you so much for talking to me about this. I really appreciate you deciding to meet with me. I know you're a little hesitant at first because you're like, I don't know too much about it, but it seems like you have kind of the perfect perspective that we were kind of looking for. So thank you so much
Good.
for
I'm
being here.
really glad to hear that. Yeah, I'm definitely not an expert. I don't know who is, right? I mean, I guess we were writing the technology, but the rest of us, we're just trying to figure out what to do. So
Yes, thank you so much
yeah,
for talking to me. I really appreciate it.
it's nice to meet you, Katie.
It's
Bye.
nice to meet you too. Bye bye.